Hola, mujeres. In today's episode, we will be chatting with Ana Lopez. Ana is a Latina certified sex and life coach who holds a master's degree in human sexualities. Ana's work includes destigmatizing sexual pleasure and desire, and she encourages Latinas to talk about sex just like they do with chisme. She empowers Latinx women by coaching them through sexual issues and frustrations, utilizing science based sex education and her background in therapy. With that, I would like to welcome Ana to our podcast, and we would like to just dive right into today's conversation because we know it's going to be spicy, Ana. Of
Hi, thanks for having me.
course.
Welcome,
So, our
Anna.
yeah. So, our first question to you, Ana, which is what we ask all of our guests, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of like your background, where you went to school, and then what actually inspired you to become a Latina sex coach?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad that you asked my background as well because I feel like it all ties in together. Okay. So the very first memory that I have of sex being on my mind was there's these little girls that used to live across the street from me, and they would come over every other weekend because it was their dad's house and their parents were divorced. And they would come over and I would tell them about sex. Quien sabe what I was telling them? I do not remember. I just remember specifically, like, we had like a swing set, and I remember like where we would sit and everything, but I can't remember what was said. And I'm very nosy, and I have a brother that's 8 years older than me. So my hypothesis is that I learned from him somehow about sex. What I learned, I don't know. So I'm actually Mexican and German, and so my mom is German, and so I was raised like during the school year with her. Um, and she would talk a lot about, not a lot about sex, but a lot about like my body, right? Like, this is your body. I had a male doctor growing up, and she was like, this is only okay because he is a doctor and I'm in the room with you, and there's also a nurse here, and like very much like, don't let people touch you. I also, her brother, so my uncle lived with us as well, and she was always very adamant about like, not that she suspected he would do anything, pero en caso de que, right? Like, this is your body, this is, whatever. Um, and so I grew up learning a lot about my body and like being like, this is normal. Like, it's normal to be like curious about your body and to know things about your body. And from somewhere, I learned about being a sex ed teacher. And I was like, this is great. I always loved teaching people things, like even as a little girl. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a sex ed teacher. And I remember when I was in elementary school, I had this list of like, I would take notes on my teachers and like how they taught and like what they did with us as students. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do this. And this is why. And I'm like, giving
Wow.
them like report cards, but like I kept it to myself. Like, this was from like probably third grade until like eighth grade. I had this list, guess I when I was going to be a teacher. And then in high school, I was like there's not really a direct path to be a sex ed teacher. So I kind of like left it at that. Um, and when I got to college, I decided I wanted to go into psychology. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go into psychology. That's it. And the more that I started talking to people about sex, for whatever reason, I started talking, like people started coming to me and talking to me about sex when I started college. Why, I don't know, because I've had the same friends since elementary school, but all of a sudden, like they started coming and talking to me. Um, and what I was noticing was that because most of my friends are Latinas, they were raised in more like, what do they see, like traditional households, right? And so they were like, they had a completely different point of view than I did. And then I would go to my dad's house, which is my Mexican side of the family, and I would say that my dad and his children are more like assimilated than like my cousins are. So I would see, like, I would go to my tío's house and I would talk with my cousins, or even hearing like my tíos talk, and then I would hear like my dad talk and like my stepmom talk and all of that. And I'm like, oh, this is like these are like three different worlds here. And I was seeing like the huge difference in the ways that we talked about sex, and even the way that I showed up like at my mom's house versus at my dad's house. So I wasn't like getting in trouble or anything for asking questions or anything like that, but it was kind of like this unspoken like rule, I guess. And I just
Mhm.
remember feeling very weird about like having a body. Like I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. And there wasn't even anything that I can remember that was said to me, but it was very much so like I don't know, it was weird to have a body in my dad's house, and I don't know why, it's just this feeling that I had. Whereas at my mom's, I was just like, I could walk around naked if I want, like, it's not a big deal, like, no one's gonna say anything. So I just really noticed that difference, and then I feel like I'm going back and forth, sorry. But
No,
so
you're fine.
I had that experience, and then in college, then I started having, these people come in and talk to me, my friends come in and talk to me about sex, and some of the things they were saying, and I'm like, "Where did you learn that from?" Like, I will never forget, I had a friend ask me if she could get pregnant from giving a blowjob, and I was like,
Wow.
"Oh." I was like, "There are people that, like, don't know, like, these basic things, right?" And, I'm like a why child, so I wanna know everything. So I'm like, I feel like I know a lot, but it's because I was so interested in it. And then I had a teacher tell me, you could be a sex therapist. And I was like, sold. This is what I'm gonna do. So I went into my master's program. I specifically wanted to be a social worker because the way that social work is kind of like sold to students is that like there's more opportunities. So like I had the opportunity to change my mind if I wanted to, but also, I really wanted to give back to the Latino community in some way. I was like, I really want to work with them. I speak Spanish. I'm able to help them. So why not? And so that's kind of why I went into social work. So the specific program that I chose was a dual degree program. So it means I was getting a degree to become a social worker, and then I was getting a degree in human sexualities education. And really, what that was doing was training me to become a sex therapist. For anyone that doesn't know, when you go through sex therapy school or when you go through therapy school, you have to actually practice giving therapy to people. So I was put in this placement. I started like providing therapy for folks. And then I was also working at a nonprofit where they did coaching. And so I was seeing the difference between the two. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do therapy. And specifically because I wanted to connect back to the Latino community, the way that I interact with my clients and the way that I have the desire to interact with my clients would not be seen as like ethical or like professional. So I just decided to go into coaching, and now I'm getting my doctorate in human sexualities education. And so I'm doing research in it about sex. So I always say that I live, breathe, and eat sex. And here we are.
That's awesome. You go, girl.
Thanks.
All those studies, and I'm like mind blown. So you're the first Latina that I meet that's, um, you know, taking it from way back when you were a little girl, and then you're still focused with that. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Um, so with that, like you mentioned on sex education. So when you say the word sex, like
Mhm.
the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, being freaky and etc. But when you mention when you're educating people, it sounds like it's not as much as learning to be like a porn star in the bedroom, right? Like you're over here educating these girls that give you a blowjob, you won't get pregnant, right? So it's like, okay. So when for you, what are some pillars once it comes to like what is really sex? Because you mentioned you have all these studies, and I would love for you to educate us on what is really sex for us humans.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, so I feel like every time I say that I'm a sex coach or I'm in sex education or anything along those lines, people are like, "Oh, you're going to teach me new positions and like all of this stuff." Um and like, sure, I
Okay.
can. Like that's great. Like episode 2, right? But like what sex really is, so I teach my clients to define what sex means for them. So sex could be a million things, and I think oftentimes when I say the word sex, people jump to the act. And when I say like, oh, I'm like really interested in sex, people are like, oh, that means she likes having sex. Like, no, I want to know why you like what you like. I want to know like what makes you tick. I want to hear about the issues that you're having and figure out in my brain like why you are having those problems and help you solve them. And so really I take a very holistic approach. Like sometimes my advice or like my recommendations for my clients is like go take a nap and drink some water. Like and that is going to help you with your sex life. And I know that sounds like really silly on the surface level, but we are holistic beings and we are kind of raised here, especially in the States. We are raised as if like, well, our sex, we compartmentalize, I think is the word. Like we're like, okay, well, our sex life is our sex life and our work life is our work life. And but that's not how that works. And especially when it comes to like partnered sex, right? Like you're intermingled, right? So like my partner and I don't have kids, but we live together, and then we have like our individual families, and then we have our life as a couple, and then like I have school, like he has work, and like we each there's like a bunch of things, but they all impact one another. If he's having a shitty day at work, it's going to impact me, not because he's going to come home and like be shitty with me, but like his mood is going to be different. That's going to impact maybe if we have sex or not, right? And so like it's all interrelated. And I think a lot of like Western culture has kind of mm, like compartmentalized things, and really I'm trying to bring back that like it's all interconnected and it all matters. And it's also very helpful because I work predominantly with Latinas. It's very helpful to talk about sex without talking about sex. Like I always tell my clients, like we could talk about like I don't know your eating habits or something. Are you lactose intolerant, but you're eating cheese and ice cream every day? Like that's going to impact if you want to have sex or not. And so we can like ease into it. We can talk about things that are not related to sex that are then going to impact your sex life.
That I'm listening to you. I'm like, okay, can you expand more on when you said eating cheese and whatever could impact your sex life? Like
Yeah.
how does stuff like things like that affect your mood or your the way you I don't know, you may be interested in having sex? Like can you expand a little more? Because that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I've
totally.
never I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
Like I've heard of
totally.
like your like you said like your mood and like coming from work and like because
Mhm.
that makes sense, right? Like as a person may be
Uh-huh,
stressed out and they're just like literally not in the mood, or you could be on your period, or you like all
uh-huh.
those things. Like I get that, but like your diet type of thing, like I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah, totally. So, I'm not here to tell people what to eat or not to eat.
okay,
But what I will say is that a lot of us tend to not know how food affects us. So we're just eating just to eat and we don't really pay attention. And then we don't know that foods like nos está haciendo daño. Not saying like we have to eat particular like health foods. Like I'm saying like if you eat cheese and then like you shit yourself, like you probably shouldn't be eating cheese, right? Like, and fun fact, a majority of Latinos are lactose intolerant. Thankfully, I am not one of them, but that it is a thing, right? There's a lot of people that have, especially women, have like stomach issues. So whether like they're going too much, they're going too little, like that can have a huge impact on like your desire, right? So like if you're constipated a lot, it can impact your mood. So you may notice like, oh, I'm in a really shitty mood and I don't know why, and just everything's getting on my nerves. You might be constipated, right? And if you are constipated, it can be uncomfortable to have sex. So one, you shouldn't be having sex if it's painful, but sometimes that pain can just be coming from like you're constipated, girl, like you need to drink some water and eat some fiber. um so things such as that. And I think it's really back to like we don't know how foods make us feel. And that isn't to say, again, that isn't to say like eat a specific thing, don't eat a specific thing to have like a better sex life, but it's really about figuring out what foods can you eat and what foods can you not eat, and maybe even what foods should you avoid like right before you want to have sex, right? Like how long does it take you to digest food? Because I'm assuming you're not going to eat like 5 tacos and then go and have sex like 10 minutes later. So, like, really thinking about that, right? Like, did you want to have sex today? Like, great, have the tacos, but like maybe let's have one or two and you can eat the rest later, right? And just really like being cognizant of that. And that isn't just with sex, right? That's with everything. But we don't think about it. We're just going about our day doing the thing. And then we're like, oh, I ate too much, or I'm like starving, right? I do that all the time. I'm like, oh, I didn't eat enough and now I'm starving, right? And now I'm screwed because I'm not at home or whatever, right? And so it's really just paying attention to your body's cues and like what it's telling you, because our bodies are always talking to us.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that because it does make sense. And something that came to mind is a lot of us like, oh, we want to keep our vaginas clean and smelling good. And what comes to mind is that I'm sure that the type of food that we eat has a lot to do with how our vagina smells and how we keep that hygiene. And I'm sure the hygiene of a vagina correlates to having sex, right? So, can you go a little bit into that on how to, because we're big on self care, and I know
Mhm.
you're going to touch a little bit more later on self care, but that's part of self care on how we feel our bodies to be able to take care of vaginas. And sometimes, as I'm not sure this is in all cultures, but in Latinas, there's various like feminine products to clean your vagina, and it's like it's a self-cleaning, you know, part of our bodies. So it's like, can you go a little bit into that of how can us Latinas take care of vaginas basically to,
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question because so many people don't know. I think this is the first time anyone's ever asked me that, and I'm like, why aren't people asking me this? Okay, anyway, so yes, what you eat can impact the way you smell, but it's not just with the vagina. It impacts everything. My dad always tells this story that he used. So my dad's a carpenter in Mexico, and he said that he picked up this worker that was homeless. And at first he thought he smelled because he was homeless. He wasn't showering, whatever. So he got him a shower, and he said he still smelled like days later. Turns out he would eat garlic as if they were mints, like whole, like the little ajitos, and was like eating them. And that's why he smelled, because it comes out of your pores. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on like, oh, what should we eat? What should we not be eating for our genitalia to smell a certain way? When in reality, it's like our whole body. So again, everything is connected, right? So yes, if you eat more fruits and veggies, if you are, taking a shit on the regular, like you are gonna smell less than if you are like super constipated, your like gut microbiome, all that science stuff is like all off, right? So I always just recommend like stay hydrated, stay regular, eat a vegetable and a fruit every now and then, and that is really going to help you. In terms of actually like caring for it, in terms of like in the shower. So again, yes, the vagina is a self-cleaning thing. Nothing needs to go up there. There is no reason that water needs to go up there. There is no reason that any creams or washes or anything like that needs to go up there at all. Really, the only thing that you need to clean are the lips around it. So basically where the hair grows is where you should be cleaning. You can do this with just water. However, a lot of women are like, I want some type of soap. I'm used to soap. What I will say is you want to use a wash, not a soap. So a soap is something typically that suds up. So I don't know, Dove or even what is the brand? Is it Vagisil or something like that? Like the Summer's Eve or whatever. A lot of those
Mhm.
have soaps and fragrances as well. So that while they're supposedly made for the vulva, which is the outside part, they're actually you shouldn't be using those. You should be using something that doesn't have a fragrance, that doesn't have any soap in it. So, Honey Pot Co. actually is a black owned woman, a women's black owned business that creates washes and wipes and other like menstrual products for um, for people with vulvas, and that wash is great. And basically, it's just like a foaming wash. It kind of looks like a foaming hand soap, but it doesn't have any of the extra stuff that we don't need. It's really just a way to clean off all the soap. Loom is another great option. They have and it's called acidified body wash, I think it's called. Getting that they have an unscented version. That one does suds up, so if you like suds, and you can just use that and wash on where the hair grows, right? So really getting into the crevices, like where your legs bend, on the inner thighs, on the outer lips, and like moving things around, right? Don't just like go in there like with a one hand. I would also say use clean hands. So like wash your hands, use your hands. I would highly recommend you staying away from like a washcloth or from like a sponge or anything like that because those carry a lot of bacteria. The best thing to use is just your hands and not your nails. Like I'm talking about like fingertips. and moving things around, right? In the same way that if you were putting like diaper cream on your baby, you would probably, especially if like they have a vulva, you're probably moving shit around, right? Because you want to make sure that it gets everywhere, or just like when you're wiping them. The same goes for you, right? Somehow we become adults and then we don't clean ourselves in the same way that we clean our babies, which I find it fascinating. Anywho, treat it as if you're a baby because the skin there is very sensitive. Don't be like scrubbing, like just gently. Like it's okay, it's gonna be fine. And I will also say that like vaginas have a smell. They're supposed to have a smell, but we are like taught that it's like supposed to smell good, but like vaginas smell. Like and when I say smell, I don't mean they smell bad, right? They have a smell and they're always going to, and that's normal. But what the most important thing is first, like start cleaning it appropriately so your body can adjust. But recognizing what your smell is, because you will be able to recognize, like someone might say like, oh, I don't like how you smell, and like, well, screw them, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But is your smell off, right? You might have an infection. But if you're using all these like perfumed soaps and all of that, you're never going to know what's normal for you. And you're never going to know if you have an infection, which can actually cause a bad smell. So things such like bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, things like that can cause a smell that your body is trying to tell you something, but it's being masked by all these perfumes and soaps.
Wow, super educational. Like, obviously, like we knew a portion of this stuff, but like the way you explained it and expanded about it, it's kind of, it makes you think like, oh, do I do this right? And I am, almost 34 years old, so like you're gonna think about it.
It's a thing, I promise you. Like, for anyone listening, right? Like, I talk to at least one person a week that does not know how to wash their vulva. Or actually, if you go on TikTok, a lot of people don't know how to wash their bodies, like in an effective way. So, like, you're not the only one.
So let's shift gears a little bit and focus on like Latinas and sex, right? Because as you know, las Latinas crecimos in like our households and our parents nos enseñan que like we're not supposed to talk about sex because I don't know, for some reason sex is a bad word for our parents. And so we're supposed to be talking about it like keeping it to ourselves, or we're not supposed to be like talking about it like with our family members or anything like that. And in turn, that causes us not to want to talk about it at all, right? Because now we're like embarrassed that that's something we're never supposed to talk about. So, can you talk about how Latinas can maybe be more open? How can they start? Like, if they're not already open about it, what are some tips you may have for us to be a little more open about it and be okay with just talking about the subject because it's really normal and it's like a healthy thing to do?
Yeah, totally. So I always tell my clients that that shame lives in the shadows. So when we talk about vergüenza, we talk about shame. It's anywhere that shame is like connected, it's because we're not talking about it, right? It lives in the shadows. So if we just don't talk about it, we think it goes away. We say that, but it doesn't. It's just sitting there like breeding all of this shame. So if you think about all the like quote unquote taboo topics like sex, money, politics, religion, like I don't know, whatever else, right? There are things that we don't really talk about or we only talk about in specific places. And so there's a lot of shame wrapped up in all of those topics, but it's really just because we're not talking about it. Whereas, like, I don't really feel shame about sex, but I talk about it all the time, right? Like the example that I always give is like parents talk about their kids dropping off or parents talk about dropping off their kids to school all the time. Like it's an everyday conversation, right? We don't have shame about that because we're just like, oh yeah, this is what we do. Like it's normal. Or like, oh, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Like, where's your bathroom? We go to the store, we ask where the bathroom is, we go to a restaurant, whatever. Where's the nearest restroom? We don't have shame about that necessarily because we're talking about it all the time. And so it starts by, and you might hate this, but especially if you're feeling shame about it, but it starts by actually talking about it. Now, I'm not saying you have to get on a podcast and like divulge your name and talk about it, right? I'm not saying you have to go to mommy and daddy's house and like talk about sex with them, right? Like you can just start by putting sex into your life, right? Sex is like very like escondido unless you go and look for it in terms of like media. Um, and so, listening to podcasts that are talking about sex, whether it's just an episode or whether it's like an entire podcast on sex, reading romance novels that have like sex scenes in them. If you like want to go like really far with this, like watching porn, right? It could be as simple as watching a movie that has like a lot of sex scenes, because typically, if it's like a regular movie that's like on Netflix, you're not going to see a ton anyway. So it's just like a regular, romance movie or chick flick or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, Even listening to songs that have sex and actually paying attention to the lyrics when they are talking about sex. Um, you can go on, I don't know, Reddit, where they are talking about sex. People are asking questions about sex and just reading about it. It's really just about putting yourself in that space where they're talking about it a lot. This is very similar to what they do when it comes to like finances. When people want to get in on their finances, it's like you need to put yourself in that space. So you need to put yourself in the space in the world of sex and just start listening to it or reading about it in that way. And eventually your brain's going to be like, "Oh, we don't die when this happens, so we can kind of talk about it." And if you're feeling brave, like ask questions, right? It can be anonymously. You can text a friend or a cousin or whoever, somebody like a trusted loved one, right? And talk to them about it. If you hear your friends talking about it, like just share one thing and just like poco a poco. You don't have to like dive straight in and like go to like a BDSM dungeon or something. Like that's not necessary. Although you totally can, but it's really just about like giving yourself permission to hear it in the first place and knowing that depending on who you are, you may feel really uncomfortable reading these things, watching these things, listening to these things, and that is okay. But the way to get comfortable is by being uncomfortable first.
I love that. So when you're saying getting uncomfortable first is one of the things that I'm sure makes us uncomfortable is being able for us Latinas to learn about our bodies in order to communicate what and how is needed to have a relaxing orgasm, which I'm sure for Latinas it's very uncomfortable to communicate what we like and how and what we need to have a relaxing orgasm. And I'm sure that it doesn't start in the bedroom, like our typical area to have sex. So can you educate us on that, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So again, yes, it does start outside of the bedroom. And what I tell my clients, so hopefully this is helpful, is that I I say I don't care, but I want to throw in a caveat. So like I don't care if you never have sex again, which is not true. I do care. But if you never have sex again, it is important to know about your body because that is how you advocate for yourself when you go to the doctor. And presumably, you're going to be going to the doctor like for the rest of your life at some point. A lot of what I see a lot of in the Latino community, and I actually have a lot of like friends and family members that are also Latino and in the medical field, and they see a vast majority of Latinos do not advocate for themselves in terms of their care. And it isn't because they don't want to, it's simply because they don't really know so about their body. So what happens is we end up defaulting to like the authority, quote unquote, in the room, right, which is the doctor. When you know about your body very well, like you should be the professional on your body. When you know and you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, "Hey, I think this might be going on." You're able to have a better like informed conversation with your doctor because you know what's going on with you. We think that our doctors are supposed to be like they're supposed to know everything about us. They have our charts and I've been seeing this person for years, and that's actually not the case. Doctors are the professional in terms of the science and how to apply it to the body. They are not professionals on you. You are professional on you because you are with your body 24/7. You're the only one that's with your body 24/7. And so it's super important for you to understand your body, what's normal for you, and your functions independent of sex. And the reason I'm sharing this is because one, it's fucking important. And two, because sometimes when I talk to my clients about learning about their bodies in order to have better sex, they kind of like turn off because that shame and guilt comes up, right? They're like, they want to learn about it, but they don't. So that shame kind of like um covers their ears, right? They're just like, I don't know, like they kind of tune out. Whereas when I tell them like, hey, this is how you advocate for yourself at the doctor, I can get them to listen. So hopefully that's what's happening now with anyone listening. Anyway, when it comes to understanding your body, it's really just about paying attention. In the same way that moms that have newborns or even toddlers, whatever, you know your baby back and forth, like front and back, you know all of the things, right? So I want you to do that with your body. So this means getting a full length mirror and actually exposing yourself to your body, because many of us don't look at our bodies. Like we might just catch a glimpse here and there if we just happen to be walking by the mirror, but we're not actually like paying super close attention. And so I want you to get super familiar with your body, not only what it looks like, what it feels like. And you can do this like in a sexual way if you want, but also in a non-sexual way. Like the texture on, I don't know, your shoulder might be different than from your knee or your thigh, and getting really familiar with what that is. Where do you have moles? Where are they? What do they look like? It's super important to pay attention to that, right? And just noticing what is unique about your body and really just getting informed in your body can be really helpful. And simply just exposing yourself, right? Because in the same way that we talked about not talking about sex kind of breeds that shame, it's the same way with the body. When we are like hiding our bodies away and not looking at them, that allows that shame to come up. Whereas if it was just like you saw your naked body every single day, for I don't know, for like 30 days or something, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is just a normal Tuesday," right? Like it wouldn't be so weird, right? When I was talking about my background and I was saying that like at my mom's house I could like walk around naked and it wouldn't, it's like, okay, this is Tuesday, right? But I go to my dad's house, it's like, "Oh no, I need to wear clothes." Like that is why. There's like a huge difference there, right? So when you are around that, you will get used to that. So starting with a full length mirror, then, and you might hate this, but get a pocket mirror and really paying attention to your vulva, paying attention to your butt, even spread them cheeks, spread your lips. I want you to pay attention to like all of the things and really familiarizing yourself. Like, we don't even have to get to the sex part just yet. Like, yes, let's get there. And also get really familiar with your body and like just what it looks like and all of that. From there, really getting familiar with like what it is that you like. I don't know. I hear this probably every day. I need to start like getting a tally, but there's so many people, women in particular, that say, "Oh, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want. Like, I want something different. Like, what I'm getting isn't really what I want, but I want something different." And I always push back because you do know what you want. You just haven't given yourself permission to name that yet. And there is something that you've liked. A vast majority of my clients have had sex before. So, like, you liked something, even if you didn't like the whole session, even if you didn't orgasm, there was something that you liked. Maybe it was the kiss, the way that they kissed you. Maybe it was, I don't know, they hugged you or something. Whatever it was, there is at least one thing, and I would venture to say like three things that you know that you like during sex. And I want you to get really clear on why you like those things. So, like, oh, he hugged me. Okay, that's not specific enough. Why did you like that he hugged you? Oh, well, I really like actually like pressure on my chest, and I really like my arms being caressed. Okay, great. That's what you want more of. It's not necessarily the hug. We can get the arms being caressed and the pressure on your chest in a different way if needed, right? So getting really clear on what those things are. And it's really just empowering to know that, like, oh, yeah, I like these three things. You don't need to like 100 things, which you probably do, but like it can be really empowering to acknowledge the things that you do like, and you do already know things about your body. So like list 10 things that you already know about your body, sexual wise and non-sexual wise, right? Like you do understand your body, but oftentimes we're going around saying like, I don't know, like we just throw our hands up in the air as if we know nothing, and that's not true.
So on that note, because I know you mentioned this on your Instagram, but you also mentioned it before we started recording. But you did say something about, okay, like I can help you have an amazing, amazing sex and like orgasm with like I have, is it 3
Mhm.
steps?
Mhm.
Did you want to share about that a little more and
Yeah,
expand
for
on
sure.
how we can do that?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like this is like a perfect segue because like the things that I've been saying are all integrated into these components. Yeah. So I say that there are only three things that you need to have mind-blowing sex. That's an understanding of your body, effective communication, and the skill of rest and rejuvenation, which are two different skills. So we kind of already touched on the understanding your body. Really, it's about understanding like the functionality of your body, like independent of sex, right? Like as a human being, what can I eat? What can I not eat? Like, what does my body look like? What is a normal smell for me? What do I like in terms of like pleasure, things like that. Okay, we cover that one. Then in effective communication, it's really about learning how to share those things with your partner, right? So like, oh, I actually don't like this thing that you've been doing for the past 10 years and I've been acting like I like it, right? Getting comfortable saying that. Um, Getting comfortable like redirecting in the moment. So this is like I love this tool and I actually use it myself. So so I'll share really quickly. But it really in the moment when you're having sex, let's imagine that your partner is like, let's say they're playing with your nipples, and you like what they're doing, but you don't know like where they're doing it. You're like, oh, I'm about to start my period. Like this is not. I normally like this, so which is why they're probably doing it, but I'm not feeling it today. So instead of being like, hey, like I'm sore, get off of me, and it kind of like stopping in the moment, you can say, you know what? I really love when you do that, and I would love it even more if you did it over here, and tell them where you want it done, and you have to show them. And I people get so annoyed when I say this, but I'm like, if it's the equivalent of you going to a restaurant and getting mad when they bring you a steak when you're just like, "Oh, bring me some food." Like you really wanted a salad, but you didn't tell them, so they brought you a steak and now you're mad, right? So like you need to tell your partner because your partner can't read your mind. And the more that you do it, the more that you're going to realize that it doesn't have to be like this. It can be sexy, right? It like, you're not just like, "Well, do this over here," right? You're just like, "Hey, like, I love that you're doing that, and, like, I would really love it. Like, you know what would be really sexy is if you did it over here." And then, like, move their hand or move their mouth or whatever it is, and then once they get it, like, right, then tell them, right? So, like, say it verbally, I don't know, moan. You can nod your head if they can see you, right? Just but giving that affirmation is a great way to like redirect to what you want. And presumably you've already identified like those 1 to 3 things that you already like in the bedroom. So if your partner is doing something, you can just be like, you know, it'd be really sexy if you did this, right? And like getting them to go that way. So um in my like with my clients I talk about both like communication in and out of the bedroom, but I think a vast majority of like the issues are from the conversations that are happening in the moment. It's very much we don't like something, abrupt stop, and then like sex kind of ends. So that's effective communication. And then when it comes to rest and rejuvenation, there those are two different skills. So this is probably yeah, I would say it's probably the most common one amongst Latinas. Um, I actually have like a video on my TikTok about this that I was just like sharing my thoughts and like it went viral because everyone was like, that's me. And I was like, girl, me too. So when we are raised, like, so this is very common amongst women, but it's also very common, like, I would say even more common amongst Latinas, is that we don't know how to rest. And when we try to rest, we feel uncomfortable, we feel anxious. So we don't rest. And this stems from seeing our moms, our tias, our abuelas, like they're at a party that's not even at their house and they're up, they're washing dishes, they're serving food, like all of that. Like I don't ever remember like my tias or my grandma or anybody just sitting down. Even now, when I go to their house, like they're always up and moving. I'm like, can't you just sit down? Like, I don't understand. Right. And so it's like very common to see that. when you go to a party or like a family function or whatever. We're also not allowed to be bored. It's like the running joke in our house, like, don't tell mom that you're bored because then you're going to be put to clean, right? And like cleaning house is important. Like, yes, let's teach our kids how to clean. Let's have a clean house. That's great. But se pasan, right? And so what ends up happening, and from my perspective, I mean, I would have to talk to these people, but from my perspective, a lot of people that are constantly cleaning or constantly like cooking or making food, like just like when it's not really necessary, is a way to buffer. So really it's a way to avoid the emotions that we're feeling. And in Latino culture, that's not really something that we're taught how to do, right? And so we kind of just like it's a way for us to kind of avoid feeling those emotions. So all of that results in us not we don't relax or don't try to relax or rest, right? Because it feels so horrible. And I'm actually in the process of like unlearning this right now. I've been doing it for like a year already. It is not fun. But it's so uncomfortable. And like I mentioned earlier, like you have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable. But because it's uncomfortable, we just don't do it. So then we never rest and then we don't know how. And then we're wondering why we're thinking about our to do list when we're trying to have sex. But it's because we don't know how to relax. We haven't built that skill, and it is a skill. And that means that it takes practice. So I think of rest as like not working. So if you think about your car, it's like parked outside in front of the house or it's parked in the garage, driveway, whatever. It's not moving. Your car is resting. It's not going nowhere. It's not working, right? So for anyone listening, like rest is just you can do things, but it's like essentially you not working. You not thinking about work, right? Like or about maybe it's about the kids, right? That's a common thing. Or about oh, what am I going to make my husband for lunch tomorrow? Right. Or like whatever it is, really just allowing yourself to just be. Then when we talk about rejuvenation, which I think rest is the first step. So let's start there. But really quickly, rejuvenation is like getting the car maintenance. It's adding fuel to the car. It's changing the oil, right? Getting the fluids topped off. So for that, that is really the things that refuel you, right? That give you more energy. So in a supposedly sleeping, but many of us are not getting enough sleep. So sleeping, right? That helps rejuvenate you. Maybe taking a nap. I think of it as like your basic needs, right? So sleep, drinking water, eating, right? A lot of us don't eat when we're supposed to, right? Eating and making sure that we're eating foods that are actually nourishing to our bodies, things like that. Going to the doctor, making sure that we're all fine and dandy, right? Do we need some type of medication for whatever reason? Stretching, moving our body. That doesn't mean you have to go to the gym at like 5 a.m. or whatever, but really just moving your body because that's our bodies need that. And so those two combined really kind of they go into that component of rest and rejuvenation. I kind of teach them side by side. So yeah, those are the things that you need to have mind blowing sex on demand.
I love that. We are big on self care, and it's like every time we have someone educate us on a certain topic, it somehow falls back to self care. And it's like the common themes of having a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, totally.
And
Yeah, I was just on a podcast yesterday and I was like, "I- if you like the most common complaint that I get is like, I'm too tired to think about sex, or I'm having sex and like my mind is like on what's for dinner tomorrow or whatever." And I'm like, okay, well, my suggestion to that person listening is like, get a nap, delegate some shit, right? Like, hiring somebody is maybe not always an option, right? But like delegating some shit, doing some shit worse, right? It doesn't have to be perfectly folded and like all of the things, right? Your meals don't have to be like gourmet every single night of the week. And really just taking care of yourself is going to get you to want to have sex. I hear that all the time as well. Like I have a
Mhm.
really low desire to have sex, but I want to have sex. But your body's not going to be like, hey, it's a great time to have sex. We haven't slept in 2 weeks and we haven't drinking water in 5 days. And who knows the last time you ate a vegetable, right? Like taking care of yourself is a vast majority of the time going to solve that low desire issue. But we think like, oh, well, and not to like knock on therapy and coaching, because obviously I'm a coach, but like I have to go and get a coach and I have to go and get therapy and we need couples therapy and I need to bring in all these toys and all this, that, and the other. It's like, if you would just make sure that you could get like 68 really, 6 to 8 hours of sleep and like drink like even 2 glasses of water, right? Like let's start there. Maybe go outside, right? Like even that is going to vastly improve your desire to have sex. Because if you're in this constant fight or flight, you're not going to want to have sex in the first place. So we don't even need to focus on sex. Like we can get there. Let's focus on the other things because not only is it going to improve your sex life, it's going to improve your relationship because you're going to be in a better mood, right? You're not going to be going off on your kids every 5 seconds or your parents, right? Like you're going to have time to spend with your friends because you're not going to be as tired. Like it's going to improve your whole life. So like let's focus on you and your well-being because again, even if you never have sex again, like this is the only body that you have. So like let's take care of it. And the sex will just come naturally. You don't have to worry about the sex.
Love it. Well, we could keep talking about this, but we're gonna have to end it here. And I just want you to share with the audience where can they find you? I know you threw in their TikTok. I know we interact with you on Instagram, and you have said you're a coach. I know you have some courses and you have some free ebooks. So let us know where to find you, how to book you, and how to download all of your awesome resources.
Yeah, totally. So if you just look me up on pretty much any social media platform at Sex and Spanglish, so it's Spanglish, not Spanish. Um, I mainly hang out on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm always in the Instagram DMs. So if y'all want to DM me, some people try to DM me on TikTok, but DMs on TikTok is not not a like, it doesn't work. But anyways, I'm always happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. You're like, oh, I forgot how to do this thing or what you said or whatever. Can you clarify? Happy to answer those questions. There are currently 2 ways to work with me. So I have an online independent study course called Operation Orgasm, where I take a deep dive into the 3 pillars that I mentioned earlier. So the effective communication, the understanding your body, the rest and rejuvenation. And there's like workbooks and things that you can actually go through to help you apply these to your life. And when you invest in Operation Orgasm, you actually get lifetime access to a private community where there are people in there that are actually working through the course as well. So it's kind of like when you're in school and you're like doing your homework and you're like, shit, I have a question I should have asked earlier in class or whatever. Like you can ask your questions there as you move through. There's also the option to ask anonymously. So you're not like putting your face out there if you don't want to. And you can also see what other people are doing, what other people are saying about the course. There's opportunities for life coaching and community and other people talking about sex. So it's a great way to get introduced to sex without, shouting it from the rooftops like I do. My other course is a Latinas only group coaching program called La Vergüenza Symposium. So we're really working together to deconstruct these sex negative cultural narratives that we hear as Latinas, right? And then I also teach you how to have mind-blowing sex on demand. So you get the Operation Orgasm course in there, but there's also some extra special tools in there for you to use. And it's just a community of Latinas talking about sex. And I'm, guided by a sexologist and sex coach. And then I have 2 freebies. I have my first ebook is 69 Ways to Fuck from Boring to Mind Blowing. And I can send y'all the links so they can sign up. And then I also have my latest ebook it was made with Latinas in mind. So it's Just Don't Get Pregnant and Other Dichos, Latinas Guide to Deconstructing Cultural Messages and Enjoying Sex Sin Vergüenza.
Oh my goodness, you are a full. And thank you so much for being here with us. Like I'm so intrigued to keep learning from you and keep digging. And like I said earlier, like, oh, I've heard that you've had this podcast and all of this. So I've definitely been learning about you. But just this one episode, I was like glued. I was like, oh my goodness. So everyone listening, go to Sex and Spanglish on Instagram or TikTok and follow Ana and get into one of her courses or one-on-one coaching. But replay this episode because she just dropped so much knowledge in this one episode that you guys need to go back and take notes. But one of the things that stuck to me was shame lives in the shadows. Like one of the things that when John and I started talking to Anna was like, John and I talk all the time, but we never talked about sex. So it's like that really tells you of how two Latinas don't even talk about that. But maybe it's because we grew up with that shame in the shadows, right? So we want to make help you start getting out of that. Like Ana said, like if you're into learning about financial literacy, you're getting in that compartment, right? So another thing is, this is when I really think that Ana, you really kicked us off to having that mind blowing orgasm. Is next time you have sex, think about what was that one thing that you enjoyed during sex. Like I know sometimes it becomes frustrating. You're like, oh, like really that didn't fulfill me, but really think about it. And then you start making out that list from that one thing that you have to choose. And then you see a correlation to see like getting to know your body and be able to become effective. So go into those three things is understanding your body, effective communication, and the resting and rejuvenating. So mujeres, I know it sounds like a lot of to-do lists, but if you're gonna choose one thing, wait, two call to actions is go and follow Ana in Sex in Spanglish. And number two, the next time you have sex, write down what was the one thing that you enjoyed the most. So thank you so much, Ana, for joining us. And thank you, mujeres, for tuning in. Go and follow Ana. Leave us a comment on our Apple Podcast, Spotify, and let us know what you most enjoyed about this episode. So thank you so much. Y hasta la próxima. Ciao.
Ciao.